Welcome into another episode of the PFF NFL show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here today. And today, Dalton, we're going to be breaking down the OG himself, Mel Kiper's latest mock draft. I'm looking at it right now. There are a ton of really interesting and unique selections in this mock draft. So I'm excited to break it all down with you today. And, Mel Kiper's one of the most plugged in analysts in the industry. So, when he puts out a mock draft, it is major news because it might be what teams are thinking on draft night.
Well, and I think worth even more examination here because this mock draft came out before a couple of big signings we had in the league yesterday that could change things even within the top 5 of the draft.
We got to talk about those two signings right now. But before we do, of course, everything we're talking about today, you can get with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. All the stats and grades for every player and team in the NFL, every player and team in college football, every player in the 2025 NFL draft, and, of course, access to our 2025 NFL mock draft simulator is available with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. So you alluded to two of those big signings yesterday. One of them, the Giants finally seem to have a starting quarterback in Russell Wilson, who they signed to a one-year deal worth $21 million with $10.5 million guaranteed. The Giants already signed Jameis Winston earlier to a deal as well. So now they have Jameis Winston, they have Russell Wilson, and Tommy DeVito, of course, as well. Do you think this closes the door to Shedeur Sanders number 3 overall? And 2, what did you think of the signing for the Giants?
I think as far as them getting better right now, it is a good signing. Russell Wilson, it didn't end well, obviously, the 5-game losing streak, but he had the 11th best passing grade in football last year. He was the best deep passer in football last year. And you look at what the Giants' issues in the passing game were, outside of Malik Neighbors making the occasional play, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, whoever it was, they weren't able to throw the football downfield accurately. That's something Russell Wilson can still do even at his age, right? So they certainly improve with Wilson and even with Jameis Winston currently as their backup, but I don't think it takes them out of the Sanders conversation at all. I think you have an easy avenue where, okay, you've got Russell Wilson starting, you've got kind of that bridge, you got a guy who doesn't, he can be there so Sanders doesn't have to start on day one. And, people have mentioned now, well, would there be a logjam? Well, it's never anything wrong with having quarterback depth, and I think in that scenario, you might see Jameis Winston get traded before he even plays a regular season game with the Giants. So I don't think Sanders should be off the table at all. If they feel like he's a long-term solution, then they should still select him third.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now. I think it's a good contract, honestly. You're paying Russell Wilson $21 million, like I said. That places him 20th in the NFL league-wide. So he's a below-average salary for a starting quarterback. And like I said, I think he is around an average starting quarterback. So you can get him at that price. It's actually not bad at all. So I do like the contract. I am more pessimistic on you about Shedeur Sanders going to New York at number 3 now. I just don't think it's going to happen anymore after signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston as well. So I just think one of two things. One, maybe they have some intel that maybe Cleveland might be taking him at number 2, and they go, okay, well, we got to get someone in there. So we sign Russell Wilson. Or they're just not interested in Shedeur Sanders, and they'd rather, go with a veteran option. Because we both know that, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they're on their last legs right now in New York. And maybe they would rather, take a veteran approach this year with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And then maybe next year, if they keep their jobs, then they take a rookie quarterback as well. So I think maybe they're more willing to maybe not gamble, but take a guy like Russell Wilson who they know what they're getting in him. Whereas Shedeur Sanders, you're always gambling on a rookie quarterback. Maybe it goes really horribly wrong, and then you're both out of jobs. So I think this is more of the safe approach for New York, and maybe they just didn't love Shedeur Sanders as much as other people thought they did. So I don't think they're going with Shedeur Sanders number 3 now.
The odd part is by signing Russ, who the Browns were also looking at and met with, is that they may have backed the Browns into their own corner, right? Because right now they're just sitting on Kenny Pickett at quarterback and nothing else, and they have yet to sign any other veteran options as well. We know Aaron Rodgers isn't going there. Could it be somebody like Joe Flacco going back? But now all of a sudden, they may have backed the Browns into a corner at that number 2 spot where they feel like they almost have to take Shedeur Sanders themselves, or they're going to be really forcing it. They own the 33rd pick in the draft. They're picking at the top of the second round. Maybe they trade up from that spot. Maybe they take somebody at 33. But the Browns, I think, actually, without Russ, they come out of this maybe as the biggest loser of all of it, because now you really go, what do? Can you really walk into next year with that roster that already has plenty of flaws in it with Kenny Pickett as your starting quarterback? Yeah. That's really a question that you have to ask right now. Even if you were to take someone in the second or third round, decent chance that Pickett would still start over that person at least at the beginning of the year. So the Browns are in a tough spot at number 2, and I think this entire top 5 may have gotten shaken up by this.
It's going to be really interesting to see because I think the draft really does start at number 2 overall. Cam Ward had his pro day yesterday. Tennessee was in attendance. They seem to be chumming it up a lot with Cam Ward, so it feels like Cam Ward is going to be a Tennessee Titan. But at number 2 and number 3, I have no idea what's going to happen in the NFL draft right now, which makes it a very, very exciting NFL draft right now. The other big signing, Dalton, that we got was Stefon Diggs going to the New England Patriots on a 3-year, $69 million max contract as well. So it seems like Drake May has finally got like a reliable target. I don't know if I'll go as far as say a true number 1 receiver. It was Stefon Diggs coming off the ACL tear, obviously getting up there in age, but this is at least a good signing, I think, for them. It might be a little expensive, I think, for Stefon Diggs, but I do think this is good to get Drake May at least a reliable weapon.
Yeah, absolutely, still reliable. And I think you're talking about a guy who still put up a 79.7 receiving grade last year when he was healthy in the top 25 of the league. That's what you're talking about now with Stefon Diggs. Is probably more of a high-end number 2 receiver, and that's okay. Look, I think you do have the same conversation about New England at wide receiver as we were just having about the Giants at quarterback, where, okay, they don't feel like they have to take a weapon anymore. But I don't think there's enough on their roster to say, okay, if Travis Hunter, and Teteroa McMillan are both sitting there at number 4, you still think about it, right? Because, I mean, you look at the rest of this depth chart, Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas I like in the slot, but how much does the new regime believe in, and how much do they have to believe in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker? They didn't draft these guys, right? It's not really – I mean, Elliott Wolf did, I guess, but if they saw – so little of them last year and they feel like, wow, this is really something, we know they're not going to be top-notch guys, they're just going to be more depth pieces. This is still a team missing a number 1 wide receiver. So I think there's going to be discussion about receivers still, Hunter and McMillan. There's going to be discussions about offensive linemen or even trading down and maybe taking an offensive lineman with a later pick if they get out of the 4th pick, or it leaves the door a little further open if Abdul Carter were to be on the board at number 4 overall. You've mentioned this before. There's nothing at these edge defender spots that say they shouldn't take Abdul Carter. Right. He might walk in there, even with Harold Landry there, as their best pass rusher off the edge. So New England's given themselves options. They can function a little bit better offensively with Stefon Diggs in there, regardless of whether they take a receiver or not. And even if they don't do it in the first round, I would still expect them to take one in the middle rounds because, again, Mike Vrabel is not tied to the guys they've drafted the last couple of years.
And I like Keon White a lot, but I still think Abdul Carter is absolutely in play at number 4 overall, honestly. So I do. Any team that already has a quarterback should be looking at Abdul Carter, honestly, no matter what you have.
It speaks to me to say the Giants, Tennessee's even done this, and when you think about their offensive line too, and New England, and you're getting more and more teams that want to be in position in the draft to just go, all right, we need to just take the most talented player. We just need to take the top player on our board. We need to fill out enough holes on our roster to make it serviceable enough at every position unit to go, okay, now we just add a special talent to the base that we already have, right? I think, again, the one team that, because of, in part, their financial situation with the Deshaun Watson contract, the one team that's failed to do that is the Browns. And they may be backed into taking a quarterback. And even if they took one at the top of the 2nd round, this is not a very deep quarterback class. You'd be really expending the 33rd overall pick on something that's nowhere near a sure thing, not like it was last year with the 6 quarterbacks at the top, right? And then you're passing up a player you may need at receiver, at O-line, in the secondary, wherever that may be. So it's a tough call right now if you're a team like the Browns. I think the Giants and the Patriots both did nice jobs making their team better and setting themselves up a little bit more flexibly for the draft.
And Stefon Diggs obviously is 31 years old, like I said, and coming off a torn ACL, but he has been one of the more effective receivers over the last few years. In 2020, he was the 2nd most valuable receiver in the NFL, according to PFF's wins above replacement metric. In 2021, the 6th most valuable receiver. 2022, 5th most valuable receiver. Last year in 2023, 17th, and then this past year is 46th. That injury plays a big part of it as well. But so, I mean, at least in 2023, he's at least still a top 20 most valuable receiver, and before that, he was a top 10 most valuable receiver for 3 years in a row, right? So it remains to be seen what he looks like coming off the torn ACL. But like I said, just getting Drake May some reliable targets is just really, really critical for New England, and it's gonna be interesting because I think before I would say a guy like Travis Hunter or Tedder McMillan, you almost have to take at number 4 overall or something like that. Now it's Stefon Diggs. I think it opens the door for more options for them. Maybe they go back to the defensive side, even though they spent so much money in free agency on their defense. Maybe still look at a guy like Abdul Carter to a Felder.
Right. When you're picking in the top 5, what you really want to be in position to do is just take a special talent.
Yeah.
Right. We can talk about needs in the mid rounds and things like that. They can find more receivers. They can find running backs. I'm sure they're going to get into possibly on day 2. But I think if you're in a position to take a special talent, and Abdul Carter is one of the special talents in this draft, or even, I think a name that we haven't talked about much with the 4th pick is would they dare do it this high? But let's say even they want an Ashton Jeanty, right? And I know it's something we haven't talked about above number 6 to the Raiders, but New England doesn't have much at running back either. If they feel like Ashton Jeanty were that special talent, then so be it. But that's what you're looking for when you're picking in the top 4 or 5. Somebody special, somebody at any position who could change your franchise.
Absolutely. So we're talking about a lot of the NFL draft. Obviously, right now, let's get into a major mock draft from Mel Kiper Jr. available at ESPN.com. Go check it out. We're going to break it all down for you guys today. Let's go 5 picks at a time, I think, Dalton. Number 1 overall, no surprise here, Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami, going to the Tennessee Titans. At number 2, we got Abdul Carter going to the Cleveland Browns. Number 3, Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants. Number 4, Travis Hunter going to the Patriots. And number 5, Mason Graham going to the Jaguars. Now, I want to point out that this mock draft was created before the news yesterday of Russell Wilson signing with the Giants. Maybe that affects what Mel Kiper thinks will happen with the Giants' number 3 overall pick. But what stands out to you in those first 5 picks?
So I think it's 3, 4, 5, right? I think at this point, Cam Ward's a formality, right? We're pretty much there. We can almost put it in pen, Sharpie, whatever you want to write it in. Abdul Carter, for now, still seems to be the favorite, at least when this mock came out, to be the 2nd overall pick. Shedeur Sanders is probably still on the board considering the Browns quarterback situation, or they're really just going to tank it and try to get Arch Manning or whatever next year in 2026. So that's another consideration. But again, I don't think Shedeur to the Giants is off the board. I think when you talk about Jameis Winston getting a 2-year, $8 million contract, you can trade that in August to a team that suffers an injury or a team that needs a better backup. That's fine. Russell Wilson, you mentioned $21 million this year if it maxes out with his incentives, but he's only guaranteed about half of that, right? And so let's take the money from those two. $10 million for Wilson, guaranteed. $4 million for Jameis Winston. That 14, that's the same number that Daniel Jones is getting paid for the Colts, right, for 1 year. It's backup money. It's expensive backup money, but it's backup money that they can afford, even if they have a rookie quarterback on the roster. So I think that's still on the board. I think Travis Hunter is certainly still on the board for New England, even with the Stefon Diggs signing. It's just a matter of, and this is something I've been talking about, we heard the Browns' opinion of Travis Hunter, that he could be a number 1 receiver in the league. Does New England feel the same way? If they do feel the same way, if they feel like he's a receiver first, and maybe they mess around with him on defense, but they have Gonzalez and Davis on the outside, right? They don't necessarily have a need at corner. If they feel like Hunter is that caliber of receiver, then you have Hunter and Diggs and the other young kids and whoever else emerges, Demario Douglas, you've got Kayshon Boutte, you've got almost an open competition, but Travis Hunter's more talented than all those guys, right? And that's something you have to consider if you're going to play him at receiver. And then in this mock, which we didn't get earlier in the week in Daniel Jeremiah's mock, Mason Graham at number 5 to the Jags. Me personally, I think if Hunter's not on the board, this has to be the pick. I think Mason Graham is the absolute perfect pick. I think he's a perfect guy to improve the Jaguars' front 7. He's clearly the best defensive tackle in this draft. I think a special player who could be a top 10 D tackle very soon in this league. I think Mason Graham going 5 to the Jaguars is one of the most sensible things that could possibly happen in this first round. I think if Hunter's not on the board, that has to be the pick.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick if Mason Graham is there, obviously. I think, James Gladstone, the general manager, the new GM for the Jaguars, like I said before, already answered it kind of saying, when the reporter asked him, why haven't you signed any D tackles in free agency? And he goes, well, guys, there's some spots for some rookies, and Mason Graham at number 5 overall, I think is a really, really good value. So I'm a huge fan of him. He's kind of falling on some boards lately. I don't know why. I still think he's easily one of the blue chip talents in this draft. I think it's interesting, though. I think at number 2 overall is really interesting because Abdul Carter going to the Browns, whereas before when we thought Myles Garrett was getting traded, we would have said, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now with Myles Garrett, now you're going just full scorched earth if you're the Cleveland Browns defense with Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter. I don't necessarily hate that. I wonder if they go with a guy like Travis Hunter instead to get like I said before, like they think of him as a wide receiver, get him and Jerry Jeudy together for whoever's playing quarterback for them next year. that at least is a better receiving core than they have right now. So I probably would have gone with Travis Hunter at number 2 over Abdul Carter, but I don't hate the approach of having Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter. Again, I'm more pessimistic about the Giants taking Shedeur Sanders now. I just don't think they would have signed 2 starting-ish caliber quarterbacks in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston if they're going to take a quarterback again at number 3 overall. So I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And then Travis Hunter to the Patriots, I love that. I think he's a guy that could help out at wide receiver, could obviously help out at corner as well. And now the Patriots, they still have a need at wide receiver, but it's not as desperate as before when they didn't have Stefon Diggs. And like I said, with Carlton Davis and with Christian Gonzalez, they have not that big of a need at corner anymore either. So Travis Hunter just kind of be filling in wherever he's needed on that roster. Then like I said before, Mason Graham number 5 makes a lot of sense if Travis Hunter is not on the board. I think for Jacksonville, their top 2 players on their big board should be Travis Hunter number 1, Mason Graham number 2, and one of those 2 players will be available at number 5. I'm pretty confident of that. So I think that'll be a great pick for their number 5.
Absolutely, I think that's the picture perfect fit. I think to go along with Josh Hines-Allen, with Trayvon Walker, with their linebackers, I think it would fill out their front 7, and you really be talking about improvement in this Jaguars defense, right? And I think they can continue to work on day 2 and 3 on this secondary. They need a little bit more on the back end, and honestly, watching their film last year, I don't think they lack that much talent. I think there was a lack of execution and lack of coaching that could come with this new staff, improving on both sides of the ball, because it really felt like, especially the second half of the year, the Jags mailed it in. That I believe they have more talent than they showed last season, only winning what was it? I believe 4 or 5 games, and just there was a lot of games where they just quit, is what it looked like. They just needed the regime change. They needed more positivity in there, and I think to get Graham in the middle of it to fix up that front 7, they could be really good really quick.
Oh, it's going to be a nasty defensive line with Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Mason Graham, Eric Armstead still there as well. That could be, all of a sudden, could be one of the best D-lines in football. Let's go through picks 6 through 10 of Mel Kiper Jr.'s mock draft. At number 6, we got Ashton Ginty going to the Raiders. At number 7, we got Tyler Warren to the Jets. 8, Jalen Walker to the Panthers. 9, Jackson Dart to the New Orleans Saints. And at number 10, Mykel Williams going to the Bears. We got to start at number 9, Dawn. Jackson Dart going to the Saints. I have not seen this connection yet. I won't say this is the highest I've seen Jackson Dart, because I have seen some mocks where he goes 3rd overall to the Giants. But what do you think about Jackson Dart to New Orleans specifically?
Well, it speaks to possibly the Saints where they might be at, because, look, I think this is going to be Derek Carr's last year in New Orleans, right? You've got a new regime. They need Kellen Moore needs a long-term answer at quarterback. I don't know if Jackson Dart is necessarily that guy or the guy that he wants, or we start to have the discussion of, okay, you mentioned it. If the Giants are out on Shedeur Sanders, could the Raiders at 6 think about it? Could the Jets at 7 think about it? Could the Saints at 9 think about it? Teams that are holding down 1 year. I don't know necessarily if the Raiders are a 1-year stopgap thing with Geno, because there's been talks that they're negotiating an extension and they're just kind of slow playing it to figure out the numbers. But there are multiple teams also within this top 10 that could still think about Shedeur or even Jackson Dart right now. As far as Dart goes, you already know, would I personally take him this high? Probably not. The Saints have a boatload of other needs, as opposed to quarterback that's probably going to sit this year until either Derek Carr is fried or just gets hurt or what, because this is still a team with the lowest pass blocking grade in the league last year. They desperately need offensive line help, pass protection help. Their defensive line is one of the worst units in football. They have a very young secondary that could use help at corner. I think for the Saints, this would be a trench pick. Even if they feel like, okay, we need a quarterback long term, but he's going to sit this year behind Derek Carr. So I just think you're taking another year and you're kicking the can down the road if you're the Saints. And they need to get better in the trenches. And I think for the long-term health of this roster, the way to go would be offensive or defensive line. If it's Armand Membu, if it's Will Campbell, however we're shuffling it, if we're moving Fuaga back over, or it's defensive line, right? I think if you're talking about if Mason Graham, for any reason, were to be on the board, would be a great pick for the Saints, right? An edge player like a Mike Green or a James Pierce Jr. would make a lot of sense. I just don't see, with this team as bad in the trenches as they are right now on both sides of the ball, how any quarterback, and I get, again, the rule of quarterbacks is if you feel like that's your guy, then take him and figure it out later. I get it. I don't know that Jackson Dart would be their guy, and this pass protection for any quarterback behind it, veteran or rookie, would really worry me.
Yeah, I don't love this for New Orleans. I would not take Jackson Dart in the top 10. I'm with you. I do have him QB3 in the draft. I know you have him a little bit lower in your personal rankings, but he's more of a guy I would take at the top of the second round or somewhere in the second round rather than a top 10 selection overall. And like you said, they're just so far away. The New Orleans Saints are so far away from being a legitimate contender. They really have just kind of have to reset the entire roster with the cap space that they have right now. I just don't think it's a great situation for Jackson Dart. I'm with you. Even Tedero McMillan, Walt in the chat has got a great point. To have McMillan at number 9 would make a lot of sense for New Orleans, trying to get another possession receiver in the kind of a mold of a Michael Thomas you're hoping in Ted McMillan. I don't think Jackson Dart at number 9 overall would be smart for New Orleans. Now, if Shedeur Sanders is there at number 9 overall, maybe they think about that, right? Maybe they think, okay, sit behind Derek Carr, we blow this whole thing up, and then we restart with Shedeur Sanders. We have our franchise quarterback. Maybe that's an option. I just don't think Jackson Dart. There are a lot of questions with him. Obviously, the Ole Miss offense and how much of that is very, very quarterback friendly. How much of it was one read and then take off and run. I don't love the fit for Jackson Dart going 9th overall to a team that does not have a very good offensive line. Is still kind of building up that receiving core right now. They have some nice players in that receiving core, but still kind of building it up. I just think this is a team that's got to reset, and I don't think taking a quarterback now is very smart for them.
Agreed. This is one where I've been thinking like this with the Browns as well, where it's take a talented player, in this case, I think especially a trench player, figure out quarterback in 2026. Another one. Could we get another Manning in New Orleans? Is that a thing? We know now who the Saints offensive coordinator is, right? Doug Nussmeier. Mm-hmm. We start thinking about A, low moving costs. B, keep it in the family. I mean, is it Garrett Nussmeier from LSU next year? I think we're gonna have all the conspiracy talks with the Saints next year at quarterback instead of this year. This year for me, offensive or defensive line, I don't care. Take somebody in the trenches. The Saints are one of the worst teams. I would say the 2 or 3 worst teams in the trenches in football. Rebuild that. And Kellen Moore, I would think he knows this coming from a place that just won a Super Bowl, based first and foremost on its trench play on both sides of the ball. That's where I would go if I'm New Orleans.
So other than the Jackson Dart pick at number 9, from 6 through 10, what else stands out?
I think 1, and we'll get into this, the lack of Tedero McMillan, who I think should go within this range. And 2, look, Carolina, if McMillan's on the board, I would heavily think about it as a number 1 receiver, a guy of that caliber of talent that they don't have. And 2, the decision of it being Jalen Walker over some of the other edge rushers. This is going to be a debate in Carolina of if they go defense and if they go edge rusher, or if they feel like if they feel like he's a linebacker, is it worth going this high for a linebacker and a small one at that? Or if he's an edge rusher, could it have been, again, James Pierce Jr., Mike Green? We see Michael Williams here at 10 who's available. If they feel like it's him, could it be Shamar Stewart? I think you're going to get a big-time debate in Carolina. If Mason Graham were on the board, take Mason Graham.
Yep.
And I think there really needs to be a debate if Tedero McMillan's on the board about, okay, yes, you need more defense. Yes, you would probably spend the entire rest of your draft on defense, which is precisely what I would do. But we feel like Tedero McMillan's a special talent. There's been some debate about this, and we're going to see him a little bit later here. In Daniel Jeremiah's mock, we saw him go 22 to the Chargers, which to me, first of all, would be shocking. Second of all, if he ever got to a team like the Chargers, you'd be talking about a whole different level of their offense hitting. But I think, again, we have to remember, even though the goal for this Panthers team is to improve their defense this offseason, which obviously was the worst defense in football, you still need to build around Bryce Young. This is your number 1 overall pick quarterback that played very, very well down the stretch last season. You got to keep that momentum going, I think. And if you were to add a guy like McMillan, and again, I know they need defensive talent. I know they need superstars on defense. I would spend the rest of this draft on defense after taking McMillan. I think they have 8 or 9 more picks after this. It would be all defensive players for me, and that's fine. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure who fits into this mold for the Panthers. And if they feel like it's Jalen Walker and he can change their defense, so be it. It's very tough to tell with this 8th overall pick.
Were they a team that interviewed only defensive players at the combine? I'm trying to remember right now. It was a while.
No, that was
the Falcons.
That was Atlanta.
Sorry, it was the other.
That was Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, I think Carolina would be smart to do the same thing. Yeah. So I think, honestly, it doesn't surprise me, though, at number 8 overall. I know that kind of stands out, but Jalen Walker on the consensus board right now is the number 2 edge in the draft and number 11 overall. So I think, we at PFF are a little bit lower on Jalen Walker just because we don't know where his true home is at the NFL, whether it be edge or linebacker. But I think the NFL and I think most people are a lot higher on him consensus-wise. So I think number 8 overall to Carolina, that's actually the most common selection for him right now in the NFL draft.
The athletic talent's there. I won't tell you he's not an athlete. He's a freak of an athlete. It's just, again, he's got the tweener bit, right? I think, what is he, under in the bottom 10 percentile of all the size metrics off the edge. And then he's still kind of an average-sized linebacker, but, he needs to work on the instincts and things like that a little bit. And then you sit there and you go, okay, well, if he's a linebacker, but pass rushing is his best attribute. How do we go about this, right? And, it's not that the Panthers don't have needs at linebacker, too. They could use him at linebacker if they feel like he's worth the 8th pick. But you've got this weird tweener hybrid feel with Jalen Walker where, again, is that the player? Is that the player that they need in their defense to fix it? I mean, time will tell. But, again, I think more than anything else, if McMillan were on the board here, I would give it serious consideration.
I would love that as well. I want to point out the Ginty selection at number 6 overall. I love this one, obviously. I got Geno Smith in there. They still have the offensive line they have, which has always been pretty solid. Brock Bowers, one of the best tight ends in football already. You got Jacoby Myers at wide receiver. So you got to build that receiver room, obviously. So I think Ted McMillan would be an option at number 6 overall. But getting a guy like Ashton Ginty, who is clearly one of the 2 or 3 best football players in this draft, I can't hate this at all. They already have Raheem Mostert there, obviously, but I think Ginty would be a phenomenal selection for Las Vegas, and I would be a big fan of this with that offense they got already.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you're looking at the very top of the draft to get a special talent. Ashton Ginty's a special talent, and this is a team that was dead last in the league in rushing grade. They were historically poor rushing the football this past season. Now you have a quarterback, a debatable top 10 quarterback in there, the way he's played the last 3 years, and if you have a talent like Ashton Ginty coming in, you could find one more receiver to fill this out on day 2. I think about guys like Jaden Higgins would fit in very well, a Jack Besh from TCU. If they got one of those guys, I think you'd really be talking about this Raiders offense very quickly about being a good unit.
Real quickly, what do you think about Mykel Williams to Chicago at number 10?
I think it makes some sense. I think if they don't end up with Ginty, I think a defensive lineman is the way to go. And I will say this for Williams. The run defense, giving them the floor off the edge and run defense makes a lot of sense. Yep. It's the same reason why this is a place, even though it's maybe a little high for me, that Shamar Stewart would make some sense. You're taking a talent play. You're getting a floor and run defense. If you can develop him as a pass rusher, cool. And Dennis Allen is going to blitz more than Matt Eberflus did before in Chicago anyway, so he's going to get a little more creative. I do think if there... Again, do I think Williams, would I take him necessarily 10th overall in a vacuum? No, but I think a pick like that for the Bears does make some sense. If it's Mykel, if it's Shamar Stewart, if they choose to go with more of a speed rusher like Mike Green, I think defensive line is the next way to go. I've seen even some mocks lately that still have them taking Will Campbell with this pick. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like Braxton Jones. I think he's a good player. He graded in the top 25 among tackles last year. I don't think it's a huge improvement. I know Will Campbell's really talented. He's really, really good. I just don't think the Bears are improving themselves because there's a road here with the way they fix their offensive line. And if they fix up their defensive line a little bit more in this draft, there's a road here where all Ben Johnson has to do is manage this offense for Caleb Williams. They could be a wild card team.
Yeah,
I don't have any doubt that the Bears could be in playoff contention with what they've done this offseason. That's where I would be at, though. I don't hate this pick. To me, for the Bears, if Ashton Ginty is there, go ahead and take him. Take him, put him behind this offensive line, start rolling, right? If he's not, then I think D-line is the way to go. I don't hate the Mykel Williams pick there. I think they need help in run defense on their D-line.
No, I like some other edges more than Mykel Williams in this draft, but I understand the thinking behind taking Mykel Williams that high. And again, Mykel Williams is a lot higher consensus-wise than I am personally on him. I do think Shamar Stewart probably will go over him on draft night as of right now, but I think Mykel Williams, like I said, helps the run defense a lot. You hope he could develop more as a pass rusher. It makes sense for Chicago at number 10 overall, but I'm with you. If Ashton Ginty is there, you just fill out that offense with a guy like Ashton Ginty. We know how much Ben Johnson values running backs from his time back in Detroit. I think Ginty would be the home run pick there, but since he's not available, since he went to the Raiders number 6, I think getting a defensive lineman, like you said, is really smart as well. So Mykel Williams going to Chicago. Let's go through picks 11 through 16 here. Fill out the first half of the first round. At number 11, we got Armand Membu going to the 49ers. At number 12, Amarion Hampton going to the Cowboys. 13, Will Campbell going to the Dolphins. 14, Colston Loveland going to the Colts. 15, Mike Green going to the Falcons. And number 16, Will Johnson going to the Arizona Cardinals. 2 running backs, Dalton, in the top 12 of the NFL draft. What do you think with the Amarion Hampton selection for the Cowboys at 12?
Okay, so there's no trades in this mock draft.
Yep.
If the Cowboys wanted Hampton, I would think about then, okay, trade down a handful of spots and get some assets, because I don't think you necessarily have to pick him at 12 to get him. I think there are some teams in the 20s that would take him. I think about Pittsburgh at 21. I think about maybe the Vikings would do it at 24.
Even
right?
Denver.
Even Denver at 20 would think about it. I think you could trade down a handful of spots and still get Hampton. Now, the other question is, okay, they signed, not for expensive contracts, but they signed Javonte Williams in free agency. They signed Miles Sanders in free agency. Do they feel like a running back, especially at 12th overall, and not even the best back in the class? Now, if this was Ginty, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I think we really might have to do this still, right? And that was what was mocked so long for the Cowboys. But to me, 12th overall, you're taking Hampton. I think, I don't know if I'd call it a gamble, but they have other things on their team they need to fix too. And I think, again, defensive line would be an option here. Offensive line would be an option. I know Membu's not on the board. He went one spot before, but that would be a good fit for them. Will Campbell was sitting there. Kelvin Banks was sitting there. Obviously, there's been talk about those two even shuffling around and where they would play. But I would probably make this a trench pick. And if they really had their sights set on Hampton, look, you could get by the Dolphins. He's not their type of back. Colts don't need him. Falcons don't need him. I don't think the Cardinals would do it at 16. I don't think the Bengals would do it at 17. Seattle doesn't need him. The Bucs don't need him. I mean, you're talking about you could trade down to anywhere in the next 7 spots. Denver, we'd start to talk a little bit. They need a primetime workhorse back. They need, they might still think about tight end or receiver if it's there. But I think you could trade down, get some assets, and still get Hampton. It's certainly the most interesting pick of this bunch. Because, look, do the Cowboys, are they loaded at running back? No.
Yeah.
But 12th overall, I think for Hampton might be a little bit rich. If they could trade down and still get him, I might be in on it. But they also don't get any better in the trenches. And, again, their biggest problem to me is their run defense. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, where I'd be looking at Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan. Even in this spot, Shamar Stewart is this another spot I think he would fit in, especially in Matt Eberflus' 4-down defense. That's where I would be looking. I don't know that. Look, would Hampton solve some problems and give their offense balance? Absolutely. Also, again, Tetero McMillan's still on the board. Mm-hmm. And I think would be a fantastic compliment to CeeDee Lamb. I don't think this is the best pick Dallas could make here. If they want Hampton, trade down and get him. Or there's so much running back depth in this class. You could get one. They're picking, I think it's somewhere in the mid-40s. You could certainly get a starter there if you want to Quinshon or somebody.
I was just going to say, this running back class is really deep. I don't think Amari Hampton should be a top 15 pick because of how good the running back class is. Now, maybe you think he's a top 15 prospect, which I get, but there are so many guys you can get in the second round in this draft, even third or fourth round of this draft. They're going to be really good backs in the NFL. I think there are like 20 to 25 backs that I think could be at least really good complementary options in the NFL. I think Ashton Ginty is worth a top 10 to 15 pick because of how special he is. I don't think Amari Hampton is that level of player. And with how deep of a class it is, I don't think it's worth forcing one at number 12 overall. So I don't love that. But I do, and there's a lot of other needs that Dallas has on the roster, and I think Tet McMillan would be a great pick for them at number 12 overall. Getting a defensive lineman, like whether it be an edge because he lost to Marcus Lawrence or a D-tackle, would be a really good pick as well. I just don't think taking a running back other than Ashton Ginty at number 12 would be a smart move for Dallas. So, and like I said, trading down for getting Amari Hampton later, that makes sense to me as well. I just don't think sticking at 12 and taking him is really the smartest move for the Dallas Cowboys. What else stands out to you in the top 11 through 16?
Honestly, I think a lot of these picks, especially position-wise, make a lot of sense. You look at Membu to San Francisco. I think that's perfect in that outside zone scheme that they ran so much at Missouri. He would plug right in at right tackle and play across from Trent Williams, and I think you'd be flying, right? I think Will Campbell to Miami makes a ton of sense. What do they need? A left tackle. What's Will Campbell? A left tackle. Sometimes football is simple, right? Colson Loveland to the Colts keeps coming up, and I know, look, they fixed up the secondary some in free agency. They could still go there. They could go another pass rusher. But, man, oh, man, Shane Steichen keeps loading up on offense. Don't hate it. Mike Green to the Falcons, stand-up edge rusher that Raheem Morris wants. And a pick that we've seen more and more often lately, Will Johnson to the Cardinals. I know there's been talk, in Arizona about do we go right tackle? I think if Membu were here, this would make a lot of sense for him. Somebody had actually asked me just yesterday, do you think Membu would be a good fit in Arizona? Absolutely. I think, first of all, if he falls to 16, great value. Second of all, plug and play at right tackle. You have no issue. You have Membu and Paris Johnson, you're living, right? But need help with outside corner? We still believe in Will Johnson's talent outside at corner as long as he's healthy. got kind of a more off, an off play-in zone defense with Jonathan Gannon. I think Will Johnson, honestly, with as technically sound as he is, he could play in any system. So I think, you have a lot of other picks here that make a boatload of sense, and I think some that you very well could see on draft night.
So someone in the chat is saying that why would Miami take a left tackle? They already have Patrick Paul. I actually think, one, they may not believe in Patrick Paul as a long-term answer left tackle, so I think Will Campbell could fill in there. And two, Will Campbell could be a major upgrade at left guard for them because Liam Eichenberg has been one of the worst guards in football his entire career, basically. I think Will Campbell fills in a major need at left guard. So even if Teron Armstead retires and you believe in Patrick Paul as your left tackle, Paul could play left tackle for you. And Will Campbell, who a lot of people think is a guard at the NFL level, he could fill in a left guard for you for Liam Eichenberg. So I actually really like that fit for Miami. I don't know. I don't think Will Campbell will be there at number 13 overall. It's kind of the first time I've seen him be there for Miami at 13 overall. But I think, him filling in a guard for them in replacement of Liam Eichenberg would be a really good call.
I think it's possible. He's here at 13. I think it depends on the order of what teams think about Membu, who in this scenario is the first tackle off the board, and how high he goes, right? I mean, there's even been some talk about New England at 4 and moving him to the left side or whatever. So, I mean, you do talk about New England, talk about the Saints. If they make a trench pick, it could be Will Campbell. It could be a D lineman. I'm not a fan of the Bears taking an O-lineman this high, but you look at the Saints in San Francisco especially going, okay, who might it be, right? Would it be Campbell? Could it be, we have to remember Kelvin Banks Jr. Sitting somewhere here on this board as the Shanahan-style blocker who could go to San Francisco, right? And you think about, is that the tiebreak between, let's say Membu went before San Francisco at 11, if he went to the Saints at 9, right? So I do think it is realistic that Campbell could get to the Dolphins at 13. I don't think he would get any further than that.
No, I think Malachi Starks is an interesting option for them at 13 after losing Javon Holland, obviously, to the New York Giants. I think Malachi Starks is an option there for at 13, but I do like Will Campbell a lot, and I think him going to the Dolphins at 13 makes sense. Even if he's not your left tackle, he can play left guard for you.
We've seen it already the last, really his whole career. If you don't protect Tua, none of it really matters. None of the rest of it matters. And he's injury prone. He's only played 17 games once in his career. He can take it to the playoffs. We know what he can do when he's healthy and he's got time to work with in the pocket, but this pass protection has to be better. I mean, you don't have the luxury with Tua like you have with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, where he can improvise for himself. He's not an improviser. He's not all that mobile. It's getting less so with all the injuries, right? You have to be able to protect him. And Will Campbell, you just mentioned it. I think you said it great. Regardless, if it's guard, tackle, wherever, one of those two spots, he's going to improve them. And he's going to improve them in pass protection. That's desperately what they need. The
other one I want to shout out to is Armand Membu to the 49ers. We've seen this a lot in mock drafts. I love the fit for them. I love it because there are some questions with Membu and whether he could play left tackle in the NFL because he played right tackle in Missouri. Doesn't have any questions there at San Francisco when you have the best left tackle of our generation and Trent Williams playing there. Fit him right in there at right tackle, and he fits that outside zone scheme really, really well in San Francisco. So I love that fit for Armand Membu.
Membu or Banks is a home run for San Fran, I think, at 11. I don't have an issue with either one. I get the idea on both. You have similar types of blockers. Some people think Membu's better. He's got better length. He's obviously only going to be 21 years old. I think either one, Membu or Banks, I'd be all in on it for the Niners.
All right, so that wraps up the first half of the first round of Mel Kiper Jr.'s mock draft. Before we get to the second half of Mel Kiper's mock draft, we got to talk about the sponsor of the show. That is Fabric by Gerber Life. What does your child's future success look like to you? A job they're passionate about, traveling around the world, or just being happy and comfortable? Whatever their journey, you can help make it easier to achieve with a kid's investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life is designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kid's investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Start with just $20 with no contribution limits, tax advantages, and your funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, no commission fees and just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, let's get to the second half of the first round of Mel Kiper's mock draft. At number 17 overall, the Cincinnati Bengals take Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from Texas A&M. At number 18, Nick Emmanwori, the safety from South Carolina, going to the Seahawks. 19, Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, going to the Buccaneers. And 20, Tedder McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona, going to the Denver Broncos. From 17 through 20, Dalton, what stands out to you?
I think so. You get the fall, or the end, I should say, of the fall of McMillan here at 20 to the Broncos, and I think Sean Payton would feel pretty good about that, wouldn't he? You have McMillan, you've got Cortland Sutton, you would have Marvin Mims inside. I mean, you put together the running game. I think a day 2 running back would make a lot of sense for them, but if you got a player that talented to fill out that receiving core, who adds size, who adds downfield ability for Bo Nix to work with, and I think it's exactly the type of, again, Sean Payton's been looking for matchup problems, right, in that offense, whether they're movable pieces. I think there's still even more to be added to their offense when it comes to more dynamic pieces, particularly in the backfield. I think we're going to look at later in the draft in this scenario. But to get McMillan at 20 is an incredible value. I think what it adds for Bo Nix and a player who can reel in off-target throws, who's 6'5", who can make acrobatic catches. And I know they already have one of those guys in Sutton. He's not as big as McMillan, but he's also a very good downfield player. You're talking about a team that's getting more dynamic. They added Evan Ingram at tight end. It still wouldn't shock me to see them get another tight end in day 2 or early in day 3 of this draft, right? Just kind of starting to fill this out. But I think that's the idea for this team. They got a couple of really good pieces that fit in with them, and Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga on defense. Fill out the offense in this draft. Get young playmakers in there for Bo Nix to work with.
Quentin Caldwell in the chat goes, I'm okay with Ted McMillan at 20. I would be more than okay with Ted McMillan at 20.
More than okay.
I
would jump out of my shoes if I was Denver. The 2 scenarios I've seen this week with Denver at 20 and LA at 22, home run. I mean, almost it changes your offense at that point to get a player that talented at number 20 overall or 22 overall. It could change the dynamic of everything you do with your young quarterback, right? I think the dimension that McMillan adds with his size and his ability, I mean, I think he's a guy who shouldn't get out of the top 8. Yeah. I think if he's at 8 for Carolina, I think that would be a great pick, right? I think he should be in consideration still for New England at 4. I think that's how highly I think of him. So to get him at 20 or 22 would be an absolute steal here for Denver. I'm with it.
I know that some people might say, oh, he's a little redundant to Cortland Sutton. I don't even think it matters, man. When you have talent that good, like
no, it's crazy, that level. What he can do, you don't pass up with this level of value, I think. There's not another guy in the draft like him.
No. There really isn't. The other ones I want to point out, too, I think Jahad Campbell to the Buccaneers makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Levante David getting up there in age. I know he just re-signed on a contract. I believe it was a 1-year contract, though. And obviously, he's a little bit older, so I think you want to find your future at linebacker. Jahad Campbell makes a lot of sense to them at number 19. And I like the Nick Emmanwori shout-out to the Seahawks at 18. I don't know if I would take him this high in the NFL draft, but I do think the fit makes sense. You got a guy like Mike McDonald, the head coach of the Seahawks. He was DC for the Ravens when they had Kyle Hamilton, another big safety who they just move all across. I think you could see Nick Emmanwori as another kind of chess piece for his defense there in Seattle.
Yeah, I don't know that he has the coverage ability of Hamilton, right, but you can see where he would think about that. I would still that's another one with McMillan. I keep thinking about, boy, Seattle, I could use another receiver. I could use a McMillan or a Luther Burden in that offense, and obviously I think this is a scenario.
You give size to that. They don't really have size in the receiving corps right now.
Right. You lost it with Metcalf, right? You lost it in the Metcalf trade. So I think receiver, Emmanwori makes some sense. I don't know that there's an interior offensive lineman I would reach for this. I think Gray Zabel makes the most sense for them, but if they feel like they could get him in the second round, we have to remember they have 4 day 2 picks. I think for Seattle, whatever they take coming out of round 1, we can't necessarily just judge their entire draft, right? There's so many teams where you sit there and you get out of round 1 and see who they took in the first round and you go, oh, okay, they already failed this draft. That's not going to be the case with Seattle. They have 4 picks on day 2. Whether they maneuver around and maybe get higher, maybe even trade themselves back into the first round to take a second player. I think that's entirely possible with the capital that they have. But with 4 picks on day 2, I think we're going to have to reserve judgment on Seattle until the end of day 2 to really start talking about their draft and how they've filled out this team. Because safety, is it their first need? No, but I'd say they could use something back there next to Julian Love, right? Receiver, interior offensive line. These are also a lot of positions they can fill on day 2. What if they came out of, round 1 with a receiver and round 2 with somebody like Xavier Watts, right? I think it would make a ton of sense. So I think Seattle's going to be one of the most fun teams to watch with how they're trying to build it around Sam Darnold. Obviously, still trying to fill holes on this defense, and 5 picks in the top 100 is going to make them very interesting.
Lucrative in the chat says that we dislike every lineman and like every wide receiver. Well, I'll tell you a lineman I like right here, number 17 overall, Shamar Stewart going to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this makes a lot of sense, right? With Trey Hendrickson potentially coming back now. There's a lot of rumors coming out that he might not get traded. It sounds like a deal might be dead for them in terms of getting traded, but I think he might be coming back to Cincinnati, so you have a great pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson. Still need help in run defense. Shamar Stewart, at least we know, is a very, very good run defender. So I think this makes a lot of sense for the Cincinnati Bengals getting help in that run defense. Now, maybe a D tackle I would have liked here, like Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan, but I think Shamar Stewart helps out the run defense a lot at edge defense.
I think with Stewart, and we're even talking in this case if it were Nolan too, where the Bengals are in a position, okay, if you're going to pay 4 guys on your roster half the salary cap, right? You have to take home run swings on defense. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anybody that's more of a home run swing than Shamar Stewart, right? You mentioned it. He does give you a floor and run defense. He's got the frame. He's got all the strength and everything you need to be that classic run defending defensive end. This is a spot where you go, okay, he's a compliment to Trey Hendrickson. They need talent at all levels of their defense, especially on that defensive line that struggled so badly this year outside of Trey. I think it would make some sense for them to go Stewart here. But again, I think, you're talking about, to me, they just need to take the most talented player. I think if they feel like that's Shamar, even if they felt like that was Jahad Campbell, right? Because we're expecting Jermaine Pratt, if he's not already gone, we're expecting him to be gone off this roster. They're going to need another linebacker. I've even mentioned that Jahdae Barron or something in the secondary could still make some sense, even though not everybody around here is the biggest fan of that. But they need help at all 3 levels of their defense. There's no question about it. Shamar, though, that's a home run swing, and I don't mind that for a team like Cincinnati.
Let's go through picks 21 through 25 now in Mel Kiper's mock draft. At number 21, we got Derek Harmon, the D tackle from Oregon, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. At number 22, Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas, going to the Chargers. 23, another wide receiver, Green Bay Packers, finally taking one. I haven't taken one since, I think, 2002. Emeka Egbuka going to the Packers at number 23 overall. Number 24, Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas, going to the Minnesota Vikings. And number 25, Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State, going to the Houston Texans. What stands out to you from 21 through 25?
The Packers have a tough decision here. I just don't. Does Egbuka improve their receiving core enough from what they already have to justify passing on an edge player that could help them? I'm trying to think of who else would be on the board. It's like James Pierce Jr. is still on the board, right, as a speed rusher. Or even a corner. Like if Jahdae Barron was sitting there and Jeff Hafley played more zone coverage than we thought he would last year, would that not be the pick here? Especially, we still don't know what Jair Alexander's situation is, if he's getting traded, if he's getting cut. It's a huge cap hit, all of that. I'm in between with this Packers team right now. They're one of the most in-between ones because they've made the playoffs the last 2 years, but they still have obvious flaws on their team in very important spots, right? Obviously, receiver, edge, corner. These are some of the most important spots on your team. Which way do they go? Should it be a Donovan Ezaraku, right, who I'm not seeing in this first-round mock here, who obviously has the Jeff Hafley connection and would help them? Are they really just going to try to wait for a year 3 breakout on Lucas Van Ness, right, when we haven't seen a whole lot of him the first 2 years producing at the NFL level? It's tough. I mean, it gets every time. I feel like every time we do mocks, I bring up the Ezaraku connection, I bring up the possibilities at corner. I have less and less of a clear picture of what the Green Bay Packers are going to do with this pick.
Yeah.
I just don't know what they're prioritizing. And you mentioned it. It's been 20 years since they've taken a receiver first round.
Yeah.
Is this really the year? Is breaking that streak with Emeka Egbuka, and I like Egbuka a ton, super high floor. I think he should be a first-round pick. But is this the year? I mean, is this really the year where you go, oh, yeah, this is the class the Packers need to get in on now after 20 years of not doing it?
It's so interesting, too, because I think Emeka Egbuka, I really like him as well, and I think at 23 overall, I don't hate it. But I think they should be looking for like a downfield weapon with Christian Watson coming off the injury. This is an offense that likes to take a lot of downfield shots with Jordan Love and LaFleur calling him as well. I think Ibuka's a really good talent. I don't know if he's a type of receiver they kind of need in that offense right now either, though. Is the problem.
And you have Golden in this spot taking one spot before. Right. You'd be talking about a Matthew Golden running a 4.29 and getting downfield the way he can, and I think that's also a pretty good fit there with the Chargers when you think about Justin Herbert's rifle and Matt Golden running down the field and Ladd McConkey underneath. I think it makes sense. I think receivers very much on the board for the Chargers. So the Packers, I think they're in a tough spot. I really do. I think they're in a very tough spot with the needs that they have, with only getting really two big-name guys in free agency. Aaron Banks is going to be their new left guard, and Nate Hobbs, who really is only on a one-year deal and I don't think significantly improves your cornerback room. I think there's options. I even talked about this with Trevor the other day. I don't even know, based on what Jeff Hafley changed with his coverages this year, if they were to go corner, which one would it be? Would you get a zone guy like Jahdae Barron or Maxwell Hairston? Would you take a man guy like Azaria Thomas or Siobhan Ravel? It feels weird because they haven't done much of anything, but I think that's the part this offseason where I go, I don't know what the Packers' plans are here. They're one of the hardest teams for me to figure out.
I know one thing that we disagree on, Dalton, is at number 21 overall what the Steelers should do. And I think D-tackle is an option for them for Pittsburgh, but you think that they should be looking elsewhere on this team.
This is a spot where I would take Ibuka. I think look, regardless of who the quarterback is, and let's assume right now it's Aaron Rodgers, right? So if we're making this pick assuming it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, as long as he wants to be there, it seems like the Steelers want him there. I get what you're saying. They don't have a ton of depth behind Hayward and Benton. I also think this is, again, a deep defensive tackle class that they could dip into later. And I know they traded a second-round pick, but even then, in rounds 3 through 5, we've talked about some pretty darn good defensive tackles you could get in there. That's a spot where I might go Emeka Egbuka. I think to add the versatility that he brings, you can play him in the slot, you can move him around the formation. I mean, we saw the exact type of player he was used at Ohio State, right? The complementary piece, moving around the Z receiver as a complement to Jeremiah Smith, who's just the absolute freak that you can't handle downfield. That's what you have with Metcalf and Pickens already. Now you add that diversity of, the easy throws, right? The guy you can put in motion, move around the formation, somebody who can just separate at the lower levels of the field. I really think Egbuka should be in play here for the Steelers because Calvin Austin, he's got speed, but he's not the route runner Egbuka is, right? He's not the separator consistently like that. That's where I would go. I get it. I get eventually you have to plan for Cam Hayward to retire, but also he's still one of the best in the business. It's just not, for me, it's not that big a concern. Right, I like Hayward. I like Benton. You can get more guys. You can fill in at defensive tackle. You're really just spelling those two guys anyway, right? And when you're getting the obvious passing situations, you're putting all those freaks on the field at the same time. Highsmith and Watt and Herbig, Hayward, everybody. So, again, I know it's the Steelers. I know they stick to their guns, and defensive line is where they win. But for me, I would highly consider Egbuka.
I think Egbuka would make a lot of sense with them. I was just looking at it too. It was pretty funny. Ted McMillan won one spot earlier. Not that the Steelers would take Ted McMillan because they have George Pickens and
if there's one team that probably doesn't need Tedero and McMillan, it's the Steelers.
I was imagining those three out there, just having all 6'4" guys.
Well, and then all you would do is start George Pickens trade speculation. Yeah. That's all you'd be doing is sometime on day 2, George Pickens get traded. That's all.
The other one I would say that I would be interested in, I know they spent a lot of resources on the offensive line already, but Calvin Banks Jr. is still available right there. And Broderick Jones has been kind of up and down in his career so far. I have Calvin Banks Jr. as the number 1 tackle and number 1 O-lineman in the draft. I would think about him there for Pittsburgh.
They would certainly be jumping ship. And I think from what, if I remember hearing a report that they are going to now move Jones back to the left side and Fautanu
to the right.
To the right. The way they've shuffled Broderick Jones around too is kind of unfair to him early in his career, and he hasn't performed well. But I would unless they're jumping ship on Jones. That's really the one scenario is where they just go, nope, this isn't our guy. We're taking our losses. We're cutting our losses. But I don't think they would do that either. For as much as I think he would fit with Arthur Smith with what they want to do running the football and make them better, I don't think they would do that.
I'll think about it.
And I still don't think we should take corner off the board here either.
No.
I know they got Darius Slay, but it's only a 1-year deal. I think corner's entirely on the board. If Jahdae Barron was sitting there, it'd be hard to pass. He's talented, man. I mean, even you could play him in the slot, and I know Beanie Bishop played okay last year, but you put Barron in the slot if you want Barron outside, or even I think they would think about a Siobhan Ravel here with as much man coverage as they play. I think you still have the same dynamics: receiver, D tackle, corner. For me, D-tackle would probably be third on that list. But if that's where they want to go, I mean, we know how the Steelers build their teams.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap up the first round of Mel Kiper's mock draft with 26 through 32. At number 26 overall, the Rams take Azareye'h Thomas, the corner from Florida State. 27, the Ravens take Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. 28, the Detroit Lions take James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, the edge defender. 29, the Commanders take Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky. At number 30, the Bills take Kenneth Grant, D-tackle from Michigan. 31, the Chiefs take Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle from Texas. And number 32, the Eagles take Walter Nolan, the D-tackle from Ole Miss. Dalton, a lot of awesome picks from 26 to 32. This is how the best teams in the NFL stay the best teams in the NFL, because all the guys that we thought should have gone a lot higher in this mock draft, well, they go right at the end of this mock draft right here. So what stands out to you from 26 to 32?
There's a lot of fun picks, and I think there's some picks at the front end of that group you just mentioned. I'd be curious on. I am not sold. I'm not sold on. It sounds funny because of the need and all the storylines this offseason. I'm not sold on Houston taking an offensive lineman. I'm not sure they're going to do it. I mean, you just look at, they've brought in other veterans, obviously Laken Tomlinson, Ed Ingram. Now they've signed Trent Brown. They're trying to just kind of fill it out right now, and I know they need a talented player, but I'll tell you what, if Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan were both sitting there on the board for me, if I'm Houston and I still have a need inside and run defense, that's a moment where we have a talent versus need conversation, because I know they need offensive linemen. But you know as well as I do, to me, there's some risk that comes with Josh Simmons anyway,
yes,
right? And if that misses, then this coaching staff, the general, everybody's going to be in real trouble here, because you'll have taken a player of need, and especially if Grant and/or Nolan goes on to become a star, you have to sit there and think about what they're looking like at other positions on their roster. And yes, protecting C.J. Stroud is at a premium, but they need another receiver. They need defensive tackle help, to me, in the worst way. They just can't defend the run. You saw it again against the Ravens, against the Chiefs, against more physical teams. They can't defend the run. It's a mismatch inside. The pass defense is fantastic, top 5 easy in football. I think if Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan or both are sitting on the board, that's I would really think about going there. I think right now they're better football players than Josh Simmons. I know it's obviously different positions. I know what they need on the offensive line. They're trying to fill it out with veterans and the guys they have in-house. I think regardless of whether they take a rookie or not, their offensive line is not going to be very good this year, right?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Man, and you know what? Here's the thing I'll say. Even if you're going offensive line in this scenario, Simmons ahead of Banks,
yeah,
I'm not about it.
No.
If you're going to take an offensive lineman here, and Kelvin Banks is on the board, I think this is what DJ had in his mock draft. Home run. I think so. I'm taking Banks over Simmons all day. So I'm the Texans. I will say this. If we get a run of offensive tackles early and they feel like they're forced to pick a guy like Simmons or Connerly ahead of other better football players, say Kenneth Grant, who I think would be a huge, huge addition to their, not just obviously literally, but I mean, I think it would change I think like a Kenneth Grant in Houston would change the look of an already good defense, right? If there's a run on tackles early, don't force it. And then in this scenario, I don't see any reason Simmons should go ahead of Banks.
No, I don't get it either. I don't think so either. I want to shout out a few fits that I think are so much fun. So one, you got Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton playing safety for the Baltimore Ravens.
And Adarius Washington.
And Adarius Washington there as well, which is just disgusting. You got James Pierce Jr. and Aiden Hutchinson playing edge defender together for the Detroit Lions. You got Walter Nolan and Jalen Carter together playing with the Philadelphia Eagles. One I want to shout out, though, here, Dalton, number 31 overall, the Kansas City Chiefs getting Kelvin Banks Jr., my number 1 offensive lineman in the NFL draft. I think this would be the home run of home runs if the Kansas City Chiefs can land Kelvin Banks Jr. number 31.
It's the best case scenario.
They took a major swing with Jalen Moore giving him a big contract. We have not seen Jalen Moore really be a starting player for very long, so who knows what he looks like. But if you get Kelvin Banks Jr. there, and he could be your left tackle for you in the future, or maybe he can even play guard for you while you see if Jalen Moore can be a starting caliber left tackle for you. This is, again, the best O-lineman in the draft, and the Chiefs get the best O-lineman in the draft at number 31 overall. I think this is the best pick of the whole first round.
If it's about protecting Patrick Mahomes and you're taking a player who's got similar pass blocking metrics over the last 3 years to Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu and those guys, this is the dream scenario. The Chiefs if they sit there in 31 and they get Kelvin Banks, especially with teams like Houston passing on him, That's all you're asking for right there. That's all you're asking for. So I think that's a fantastic pick. I'll throw one more at you. I think the Bills ending up with Kenneth Grant at 30 would be big time for them. I think for the way they run their defense and the help that they need inside, I think getting a guy like Kenneth Grant, or even if it was Walter Nolan and Grant went sooner and then it was Nolan at 30, I think it's a great pick for them. The Bills need help in run defense. They need help at all three levels of the defense. I think corner would be a consideration, but no, Grant would be too hard to pass up there. And you mentioned it, Banks at 31 of the Chiefs. That would be the dream scenario. I could not think of a better scenario for Kansas City to once again rebuild an offensive line after a Super Bowl loss. I think if you got Kelvin Banks in there, the Chiefs are going to stay on top for a reason, and they do it all the time.
Yeah, I think Kelvin Banks going there, Pierce going to the Lions is also really, really fun with Aiden Hutchinson the other side of there as well. So a lot of fun picks there from 26 to 32. Out of the entire first round, Dalton, what was your favorite fit of the first round?
I mean, if I had an obvious one, I would say, I'm all about Mason Graham at 5, and I know that's getting debated because of arm length, and with him, I don't care. For the Bucs getting Jahad Campbell at 19 would be nice. I think Tampa Bay, I think two guys I'm really locking in on at 19, and one of them didn't go in the first round in this scenario. Two guys I'm locking in on at Tampa Bay for 19. One is Jahad Campbell. Mm-hmm. Two is Donovan Ezeraku. I think you talk about one of them fills that need at linebacker. Campbell would fill that need at linebacker next to Levante David, who's doing the annual one-year contract. And, the KJ Britt is gone. They're really trying to find a starting caliber player, somebody to take over the reins eventually from David. Campbell makes a lot of sense. Or an edge rusher, even James Pierce Jr. would make some sense for them, one of those stand-up edge rushers. But Campbell at 19 to the Bucs, I think, makes them a lot better, especially to get to learn from a guy like Levante David and be, kind of finally that bridge of that Devin White didn't end up being for that. It was the idea with Devin White when they drafted him was he's going to play next to Levante. It's going to be great, and then he'll take over as the captain here. I think you take another swing like that with Campbell if he's there at 19. I don't mind that at all.
I don't hate that at all. So I think Jahad Campbell is a great pick at 19. Will Campbell at number 13 I think is a really good pick as well from Miami. Like I said before, he could play left tackle for you, or he could play left guard for you with Liam Eichenberg kind of struggling there. So I think that's a great pick. And then, like I said before, the Kelvin Banks Jr. to the Chiefs at number 31 overall. I think it's just a amazing pick.
It's a steal.
City.
It's a steal. Again, it's a scenario where how much of a run of offensive linemen do we get from, I would say, 9 to 16? How many of those guys go in that range? And then you've got some teams that maybe will or won't think about it again. It's the struggle, too, of the lack of first-round interior players. We don't see Tyler Booker's name anywhere in this first-round mock, right? So we're talking about if the league is lower on this offensive line class, really as a whole when you think about it, because you've only got 2 of the top 24 being offensive linemen here in this mock with Membu and Campbell. There's conversations where this could be a thing where they're just not as high on this year's offensive line class even as they were last year with some of the guys we saw go in the first round.
Absolutely. So that wraps up Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest mock draft, breaking it all down for you guys right there. We got plenty more coming surrounding the NFL draft very soon with our own 2025 NFL draft position rankings right here on this channel. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. And of course, subscribe to PFF at subscribe.pff.com to get access to all of our rankings, all of the grades, all of the metrics for every prospect in the 2025 NFL draft and PFF's mock draft simulator. For producer Quinn, producer Tyler, producer Eli back there for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys very, very soon.